You waited, through silence, through mixed signals, through words that didn't match actions. You waited, not because you were weak, but because you believed love meant patience. You gave her the benefit of the doubt, even when she gave you none. You thought maybe, if you held on just a little longer, she'd see. She'd change. She'd come back different, but she didn't. And then, one day, something inside you didn't break. It clicked. You realized you were not her savior. You were not her. Second chance, you were your own. She thought you'd wait forever, but you left quietly and became untouchable. In this video, we're not here to bash her. We're here to see you, the man who gave more than he received, the man who confused his loyalty with self-abandonment. This moment isn't about her. It's about your return, not to her, but to yourself. Because you're not here to beg, you're here to rebuild, to reclaim the strength and clarity that was always within you, waiting to rise. The path ahead isn't about chasing what left. It's about choosing peace, choosing growth, choosing you. Comment, I don't chase what walked away. Number 1, waiting isn't loyalty. It's self-denial. You didn't stay because she was right for you. You stayed because you didn't know what to do without her. Have you ever sat in silence, staring at your phone, convincing yourself she just needs time, that the space she asked for is healthy, that it's love evolving, but somewhere deep inside, you weren't waiting for clarity. You were waiting for permission to still matter, because she used to look at you like you were everything. And now nothing, you called it patience, told yourself that real men endure, that strong men don't quit, that if you held on long enough she'd circle back, realize your value, apologize. Choose you. But what you were really doing was abandoning yourself slowly, quietly, consistently, because each time you excused the silence, each time you swallowed your need for closeness, each time you waited for the breadcrumb of a reply, you weren't loving her. You were avoiding the grief of letting go. And here's the raw truth. Loyalty becomes self-denial when it requires you to disappear to keep someone else comfortable. But you didn't see it that way. Because men like you don't walk away easily. You stay because you mean it, because your word matters, because you confuse consistency with worth. But what if waiting wasn't strength? What if it was fear wearing armor, the fear of starting over, the fear of loneliness whispering, maybe this is the best I'll ever get. The fear of feeling like a failure because she left and you couldn't fix it, so you waited. Not out of devotion, but because you were still begging for a different ending. One where you didn't have to face the mirror and admit, she's not coming back as who you hoped she'd become. See, there's a dangerous lie in this kind of love, that your suffering proves your value, that if you endure enough pain, it transforms into reward. But that's not love. That's trauma bonding. That's codependence. That's the little boy in you trying to earn affection by disappearing. And Stoicism teaches us that peace doesn't come from controlling others. It comes from reclaiming what we give away. Your attention, your energy, your time. You gave her everything. But what did you give yourself? A man who waits too long forgets how to move, forgets how to speak without apology, forgets how to choose himself first, without guilt. You don't have to hate her, you don't have to scream, but you do have to let go of the idea that waiting makes you noble. It doesn't. It makes you invisible. Real loyalty doesn't require self-erasure. Real love doesn't feel like starvation. So here's your turning point. You stop waiting. You stop watching. You stop wondering. You stand. You gather your pieces. And you walk. Not to make a point, but because your soul is done begging. This isn't love, it's fear dressed as devotion. You were never waiting for her. You were waiting to remember who you were before you lost yourself in her absence. And now you remember. Number 2, she was comfortable, not committed. She needed a place to land. You mistook it for a reason to stay. Let me ask you something. Have you ever mistaken her return for a sign that things were finally changing? That maybe this time it would be different, because she texted at midnight, because she said she missed your arms, because her voice softened for a moment and the way she leaned into your chest felt like coming home. But here's the quiet, brutal truth. She wasn't coming back to build something real. She was coming back to feel something familiar. You thought her presence meant progress. You thought her smile meant sincerity. You thought your patience had finally paid off. But what she really wanted was comfort, not commitment. She wanted to escape her loneliness, not confront her patterns. She wanted to feel safe in your arms without having to be safe with your heart. She wanted to be held, not seen. And you mistook that for intimacy. You mistook her temporary need for your permanent worth. That's how good men get trapped in emotional loops. You confuse her craving for closeness with a desire for depth. But closeness isn't connection. Access isn't affection. And presence doesn't always mean love. She didn't stay to grow. She stayed until it got uncomfortable. She stayed until your standards rose. She stayed until your voice stopped bending. And every time she walked out, she knew the door would still be open because you made it so. Not because you were weak, but because you thought forgiveness was the same as hope. But the truth is, she was never building something with you. She was borrowing your stability to quiet her own chaos. There's a name for that. It's called emotional dependency. It looks like love. It even feels like love, but it's not. Love doesn't ask you to stay quiet about your needs. Love doesn't retreat when things get deep. Love doesn't reappear only when it's convenient. You kept thinking she was coming back to choose you. But she wasn't choosing you. She was choosing the comfort you created, the peace you provided, the validation you gave her when her own reflection wasn't enough. And here's the hardest truth you'll have to face. She didn't love you. She loved how she felt around you. There's a difference. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. A stoic man understands. Affection that runs only as deep as comfort is not love. It's survival. It's a pattern, a cycle, a reflex. Love shows up when it's hard. Love digs in when it's inconvenient. Love doesn't run from accountability. It leans into it. And when you stop confusing access with effort, when you stop mistaking emotional crumbs for a meal, you realize you were starving all along. The truth is, you were the one committed. You were the one showing up. You were the one hoping, building, forgiving. But she was just comfortable. And that's not your failure. That's your wake-up call. You don't need someone who needs you. You need someone who chooses you. You were not a placeholder. You were a mirror reflecting her unhealed parts. And when people don't want to face themselves, they don't stay with mirrors. They find shadows. So now it's your time to close the door she never valued, to become the man who doesn't just offer peace, but lives in it, with or without her. This isn't love. It's familiarity wearing a mask. You thought you were building something real, but what you were really building was a home for someone who was just passing through. And now, it's time to stop lighting fires for people who only come to warm their hands. Number 3, you were always the safe place, but who was yours? You made her feel whole while you slowly disappeared. Let me ask you something that most men never say out loud. Who holds you when you're tired? Who listens when your silence becomes too heavy? Who says it's okay to not be okay and actually stays to mean it? Because you were always the strong one. You carried the weight of two hearts. You gave without being asked, stayed without being thanked, and you held space for her chaos, her fears, her wounds. You became her shelter, her calm, her constant, but when the storm came for you, she disappeared. Not because she couldn't help, but because she never learned how to give, only how to take. And you never asked. You didn't want to seem needy, didn't want to break the image of being the one who always had it together. You told yourself, I've got this. Even as the cracks deepened beneath your chest. That's the curse of being the protector. No one checks on the shield. No one sees the weight behind the armor. You were her safe place, but who was yours? There's a quiet kind of suffering that comes with being the emotional anchor, the one who's always expected to show up, to understand, to absorb. And the world tells you that's what strength looks like, being the rock, being the wall that doesn't crumble. But the truth is, even rocks erode, even walls crack. And it's not weakness to ask for softness. It's not failure to want to be held. It's not selfish to say, I'm not okay. But you didn't, because somewhere along the way, you learned that your needs were a burden, that being vulnerable made you less of a man, that to be worthy of love, you had to be invincible. So you swallowed your grief, silenced your needs, and kept showing up for someone who only showed up when she needed something. This is the trap many men fall into. You think that being needed is the same as being loved. You think that if she leans on you, it means she values you. But needing you is not the same as seeing you, and when you confuse the two, you start to believe that your worth is in your utility, that as long as you're useful, you'll be kept, as long as you're solving problems, you'll be wanted. But that's not love, that's one-sided survival. Love is reciprocal. It's shared safety. It's the kind of bond where both hearts have room to breathe, to break, to be seen. And when the emotional labor is only ever yours, when your pain is met with distance, when your softness is met with silence, you are not in love, you are in imbalance. The Stoics remind us, he who depends on the approval or affection of another for peace has no peace at all. You gave her peace. You offered your chest, your voice, your presence, but peace isn't something you're supposed to give away until you have none left. It's something you share. It's something you deserve. You deserve a love that asks, how are you really? A love that stays when you're quiet. A love that knows you're not just a provider of strength, you are also a man who bleeds. So let this be your moment of clarity. You don't have to keep being the strong one for people who never asked about your breaking point. You don't have to keep offering warmth to someone who disappears every winter. You were the safe place, but now it's time to become your own. And from that place, only welcome those who know how to build safety with you, not just in your strength, but in your softness. This isn't love. It's one-sided survival. You were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong person. And now you know better. Now you choose you. Number 4. Her silence wasn't confusion. It was clarity. You kept rereading her silence, hoping it would eventually say, love. Let me ask you, how many nights did you spend staring at your screen, waiting for a message that never came? How Many times did you replay the last conversation, dissecting every word, every pause, every unfinished sentence, just trying to find something to hold on to, some hint that she still cared, some sign that she was just figuring things out. But deep down, you already knew, didn't you? You knew the silence wasn't confusion. It was clarity. It wasn't because she didn't know what she wanted. It was because what she wanted wasn't you. Still, you waited. You convinced yourself she was just overwhelmed, that maybe life got in the way, that maybe she needed space, that maybe, if you were patient enough, kind enough, still enough, she'd come back with answers. But the silence, that was the answer. She didn't lose her phone. She didn't forget how to type. She didn't suddenly become so emotionally frozen. She couldn't respond to a simple message. No, she just chose not to. And that's what you couldn't face, not the silence itself, but what the silence meant. Because facing that truth meant letting go of the fantasy that she cared as deeply as you did, that your patience was earning her affection, that the love you gave was being quietly reciprocated, just delayed. But that wasn't happening. And the longer you waited, the more you confused absence for mystery. You made her silence a puzzle to solve, when really, it was a boundary she didn't have the courage to say out loud. She didn't want to hurt you, so she said nothing. But that nothing, it hurt louder than any goodbye. You see, the human mind will do anything to protect the heart from breaking, so it creates illusions, narratives, hope. Hope that maybe she just needs time. Hope that maybe she's testing your loyalty. Hope that maybe, just maybe, she'll wake up one day and realize what she lost. But that kind of hope, it's not hope. It's emotional self-harm dressed as optimism. The truth is, she was not confused. She was just comfortable letting you linger in emotional limbo, because it was easier for her to disappear than to deal with your disappointment. And you were loyal to the potential, not the reality. Stoic philosophy teaches us this. Do not waste time interpreting silence. Observe what is, not what you wish it to be. Silence is not an invitation to wait. It's a signal to walk. Because the moment you start romanticizing mixed signals, you forget that love is supposed to be clear. Love doesn't keep you guessing. Love doesn't vanish when things get difficult. You deserve a love that speaks, a love that shows up, a love that doesn't make you wonder if you matter. Her silence wasn't a question. It was a period. It was the end of the sentence, even if you were still writing chapters in your head. And now it's time to close the book, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with a quiet understanding that the clarity you were begging for was always there. It just didn't look the way you wanted. This isn't love. It's false. Hope repeating itself. You don't need another message to move on. You don't need closure from someone who closed the door without telling you. You just need one final realization. She didn't forget you. She just never intended to stay. And now you don't wait, you walk. Number 5, you stayed because you saw her potential. You loved the version of her that only lived in your imagination. Let me ask you this, brother. How many times did you forgive what she did because you believed in what she could become? How often did you look past the broken promises, the emotional distance, the sharp words, because you caught glimpses of something better beneath it all? You saw the light in her eyes once. You felt her warmth once. And in those fleeting moments, you made a home out of hope. You weren't in love with who she was. You were in love with who you thought she could be. You stayed not because she treated you right, but because you saw her pain, You saw her wounds. You saw her childhood trauma, her fear of intimacy, her patterns of withdrawal. And instead of running, you made it your mission to help her rise. You thought if you just loved her hard enough, deep enough, long enough, she would transform, she would heal, she would finally become the partner you imagined. But here's the quiet tragedy in that story. She never asked you to fix her. She never chose growth. She never committed to change. She just let you pour while she remained the same. And every time she disappointed you, you told yourself it wasn't her. It was her trauma, her past, her fears, her unhealed heart. You gave her grace over and over again, because that's what good men do, right? But the truth is, there's a fine line between compassion and self-abandonment, between empathy and delusion, between love and projection. You weren't connecting with her. You were connecting with her potential. You were loving a future version of her that only existed in your mind. And in doing that, you slowly disappeared. You silenced your own needs. You lowered your standards. You made excuses for behavior that chipped away at your self-respect, not because you were blind, but because you were hopeful, because you believed that one day she'd wake up and become the woman you saw in her brightest moments. But people don't change because you see their light. They change when they choose to face their darkness. They change when they decide it's time. And she never did, because why would she? You accepted her exactly as she was, even when it hurt you. That's the illusion heartbreak builds, that your love has the power to rescue someone from themselves. But that's not love. That's savior syndrome. That's emotional martyrdom. That's you becoming her mirror while she refused to even look. The Stoics teach us to see reality as it is, not as we wish it to be, not as it could be in some perfect future, but as it is, right now. And the reality is this: she showed you who she was. Every time she pulled away when you needed closeness, every time she broke a boundary and blamed you, every time she said she'd change, then didn't. You just didn't want to believe it, because to accept who she really was meant letting go of who you thought she might become. But that's what real love is. Not holding on to potential, but standing in truth, even when that truth hurts, even when it means walking away. So here you are now, not bitter, not angry, just awake. You don't need to hate her to leave. You just need to finally believe what she showed you, not what you hoped for, not what she promised, not what you imagined, what she showed you. This isn't love. It's projection confused for connection. She didn't fail you. You failed to see that she was never ready, and now you are. You're ready to stop loving potential. You're ready to start choosing reality. You're ready to find peace in the truth, instead of pain in the illusion. Number 6, walking away isn't giving up. It's growing up. She didn't lose you when she left. She lost you when you stopped waiting for her to change. Let me ask you something. Not many men allow themselves to say out loud, what if walking away isn't the failure? What if it's the moment you finally got it right? You told yourself that leaving would mean you didn't care. That if you stopped trying, it would mean the love was never real. That silence on your end would make you look cold, bitter, broken. But here's what most people don't understand. Walking away when you still love them takes more strength than staying ever did. You didn't leave because you hated her. You left because you couldn't keep hating yourself for how much you tolerated, for how much you gave, for how long you betrayed your own peace in the name of loyalty. You see, a boy believes that love is measured by how long he can hold on, but a man A man knows that sometimes the most powerful thing he can do is let go. You stopped performing, stopped chasing closure from someone who only gave you chaos, stopped explaining yourself to someone who never really heard you. You didn't leave with rage, you left with clarity, not to prove a point, but to reclaim your own. Because real men don't chase, they choose. They choose peace over proving, stillness over noise, self-worth over validation. And that's what changed in you. You stopped believing that your love was only valuable if it was accepted. You stopped trying to earn your place in someone else's life because you finally realized you were the blessing, you were the peace, you were the one showing up, loving deeply, forgiving quietly. But no matter how much of yourself you gave, it was never enough for someone who didn't even know what they wanted. She didn't lose you when she left. She lost you when you healed, when you stopped hoping she'd come back different, when you stopped begging the universe for signs, when you stopped sacrificing your voice just to keep hers around. And maybe she'll never admit it. Maybe she'll never say you were the one who got away. But deep down, when she's alone, she'll remember the way your presence made her feel safe, the way your love never needed to be earned, the way your silence, in the end, said everything. Because silence doesn't always mean bitterness. Sometimes it's the sound of a man who finally respects his soul. The man who doesn't need revenge, doesn't need applause, doesn't need to be missed to know his value. The Stoics say, freedom is the ability to walk away from what no longer serves your peace. And that's what this moment is. It's not the end of love. It's the beginning of wisdom. You're not giving up. You're growing up. Outgrowing the need to be chosen by someone who couldn't even choose herself. Outgrowing the story that said your love had to hurt to be meaningful. Outgrowing the boy who waited for validation and becoming the man who now chooses himself. So here's your still, steady truth. You're not leaving the table bitter. You're leaving it full. Full of lessons, full of strength, full of clarity that only pain could teach. This isn't love. It's your evolution in silence. You're not who you were when she left. You're not waiting anymore. You're walking, and this time, you're not looking back. Number 7. The power was never in her hand. It was always in yours. You weren't abandoned. You were reminded of your own worth. Let me ask you something you've been too tired to ask yourself. When did you forget that you were the prize? Not the one to be tested, chased, or doubted. Not the backup plan or emotional safety net, but the man who gives his love with intention, who holds presence like fire, and whose silence speaks louder than her apologies ever did. You gave away your power without even noticing, not because you were weak, but because you loved deeply. You handed her the pen. Let her write the narrative. Let her decide when to come close and when to pull away, when to engage and when to go cold. And each time she left, you waited. Each time she returned, you welcomed. And somewhere in that cycle, you began to shrink. You forgot that your attention is currency, that your presence is value, that your love is gold. And when love becomes performance, when you find yourself proving instead of living, chasing instead of choosing, sacrificing your voice just to be seen, you are no longer in love. You are in debt, emotional debt, spiritual debt, drained from paying a price that was never yours to carry. But the most powerful moment in your story wasn't when she walked away. It was when you realized you could stop giving, and in that stillness, that sacred, terrifying silence, you found something she never gave you, yourself. Because silence isn't weakness, it's presence. It's detachment with dignity. It's saying, I won't argue for a space I was never meant to beg for. This isn't about control, it's not about ego, it's about clarity. It's about remembering that the energy you give out is not a free commodity. It shapes rooms, it calms storms, it heals, but only when it's respected. And now, you've withdrawn it, not with noise, not with anger, but with peace and the silence that followed. That silence is not emptiness, it's sacred ground. The sound of you reclaiming your worth without needing to convince anyone of it. That's what men often forget. That the power was never in her hands, it was in your choice to give. Your choice to stay, your choice to try, and now your choice to stop. Stoic philosophy reminds us that the only thing within our control is ourselves, our perceptions, our decisions, our direction. You can't control how she treated your heart, but you can choose what that heart holds on to. And today, you stop holding what hurt you. You stop playing a role in a story that no longer honors you. You no longer crave her recognition. You no longer bend for breadcrumbs. You no longer fear her absence. Because you've learned that the loudest peace comes when you let go of what made you question your value. This isn't love. It's your rise without applause. You don't need her to see it. You don't need her to regret it, because you've seen yourself fully, clearly, finally. And in that moment, the man who gave everything came back to himself, not bitter, not broken, but whole and untouchable. You're not waiting anymore. You're not checking her page, hoping for a sign that somehow this time things will be different. You're not desperately trying to prove you were good enough, because you know you were. You know exactly what you gave. And now, for the first time in a long time, you give that same energy back to yourself. This isn't the end of love. This is the end of losing yourself in the name of love. The love you thought would heal you. The love you thought you could save. But you've realized now, you were already whole. You've always been whole. You just needed to remember that. You see, real strength isn't about holding on to someone who doesn't see your worth. Real strength is about letting go when you finally realize that your peace isn't up for negotiation. You thought she'd be the one to choose you forever, but instead, you chose yourself, and that's the greatest act of love there is. She thought you'd wait forever, but you became what she never expected, untouchable, at peace, and whole. You don't need her approval anymore. You don't need her validation, because you're finally grounded in the truth of who you are, a man who doesn't chase what doesn't honor him. So let this be the moment you choose to walk forward, without regret, without bitterness, just strength, clarity, and peace. Comment, I'm not who I used to be. Subscribe if you're walking away in silence, not to prove a point, but to protect your peace. You've evolved. And now the silence is no longer your pain, it's your power.